طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today inshallah we're going to start chapter 12. In chapter 12 he actually discusses something relatively new to us, which is the doors to the heart. So we had talked about before how the heart is like a structure that has multiple doors, and here he actually starts talking about those doors and what they are. And why is that important? He mentioned it last time, if you guys remember. Because it's through those doors that shaitan gets access to. To what? To the heart itself, right? It's you have the shield around you, right? There's the shield around you, and he's saying this shield is all of these doors. And in order to get to your heart, you have to get through one of those doors. So he's actually going to talk about what those doors are. And why is that so important? He mentioned this in the last chapter too. Huh? Well, to protect them, obviously, yes, that's very important. And he talked about that the importance of knowing those doors is the importance of knowing not shaitan, but it's not about knowing shaitan, but about knowing his tricks, right? And knowing his methods. Because he had likened it to, I don't know if you guys remember, like if a snake got into your pants, right? Would you be worried about the color of the snake, what type of snake it was, right? What do you want to do? Right? You just want to get it out, right? You want to get out, you want to remove it. And he's saying this is the same way that we need to deal with the shaitan. And the way to deal with them is to understand what his tricks are and what the doors are that lead to the heart. What are the things that lead to the heart? So I don't know if you guys are very famous. There's a very famous English saying, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, right? It's a famous English saying. So there are different ways to get to people, and there are different ways to get to an individual's heart. Interestingly enough, he actually mentions the stomach as a way. So he mentioned, the first one he mentions is anger and appetence. So this is like basically it's a ghadab wa shahwa, right? So can you guys give me an example, or why do you think he would mention something like this? Why? Why does that happen? How you lose control, right? When you're angry, you actually lose control of your actions and what you're going to do. Yes? But there are also levels to anger. So we're going to talk about all of these things and what he means by them. Because is anger in and of itself a problem? If somebody curses Allah, right, I'm going to get angry. Yes or no? Is that a good response or a bad response? Right, this is a good response. If somebody curses the Prophet ﷺ, somebody curses my mother, somebody yells at, is hurting my friend, is being angry, is that good in those situations or not? Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with anger in and of itself, how it's expressed, how we let it consume us, how, so we'll talk about these levels, inshallah. The next thing he mentions is envy and greed. He says this is another means to enter an individual's heart. Is envy ever good? No. Yes. Tayyib. Huh. Like when? Envy, good envy and bad envy. Ahsant, right? So there's like, you would say there's ghibta and hasad, right? So there's good envy and there's bad envy. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا تحاسدوا إلا في اثنين. He says, don't be jealous of others. Huh? Yeah. What are those two? An individual who's given money, right? And he spends it in Allah's path. And an individual who's been given ilm, and he's been given knowledge and he teaches the others. But what's the difference? And again, we'll talk about the subtleties and we'll talk about the difference between them, because some of these in and of themselves is not a problem, right? In and of themselves, they cannot be a problem. And what does Ghazali mean and shaitan's role in utilizing these things? He also talks about satiety. Satiety is like, what is the word that he used? Shaba. Satiety is when like you fill your stomach. And he mentions it. He also mentions love of adornment. Again, we'll talk about it. What does it mean? Why is he mentioning it? Striving to gain the favor of others. Haste, ajla. To be in a hurry. Assets. He says specifically dirham and dinar. But it could be any, whether it be fiat or it could be commodity money, currency, either of those, chasing after money, right? This is what he means here. Stinginess and fear of poverty. This is another one that he mentions. Sectarian and partisan prejudices. Yani basically he's saying here, you know what he's saying here? Tamadhub wa ta'assub ilayha. So he doesn't have a problem with following a particular madhab. Ghazali himself was what? Do you guys know what madhab he was? He was Shafi'i, right? He himself was Shafi'i. So obviously he didn't have a problem with the madhab. He had a problem with how peoples viewed the madhab and how they reacted and dealt with one another. Another issue, something that is very common that we see, inciting the common people to study theology, yani to study sifatillah, dhatillah, which is beyond their intelligence. Yani they don't understand it, at a very basic level. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about certain characteristics in the Quran, does he command us to think about how they are? No. And some people, they'll actually busy others with this, which is a big problem, it's a big issue. And lastly, su' al-dhann bil muslimin, thinking ill of Muslims. So if we go through these one by one, anger, envy, satiety, love of adornment. The first one here, anger, he already talked about. We said that there are times where it's good to be angry, there are times that it's bad to be angry. When does anger become a real issue? When does it become a real problem? Right, when we don't control it. Like when we allow ourselves to lose our sense of what we're doing, how we justify things. And at that time, you know what happens? That's when the shaitan comes through the door. Because we've dropped our guard. We've allowed the anger to consume us. The second, he says here, envy and greed. And we said that there are situations where it's good. What about those situations where it's bad? And what does it mean to have bad envy? Do all of us at some time get that feeling in our heart? Like when we see somebody or we hear somebody who has an accomplishment, right? We get that scratch at our heart, right? We get that scratch at our heart. But what should we do at that point? I'm sorry? We should wish them well, make dua for them, right? That's something that's really important. Say mashallah, right? This is something also that is very, very important to do. But having that feeling in and of itself, it's not problematic, but if we make dua for that person, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe he can help remove that feeling from our heart. You could try to avoid it, but some feelings are very natural, right? Some things are very natural. We try not to be jealous of others, right? And sometimes it's not even personal jealousy. Sometimes someone will come up to you and be like, hey, my son, he just graduated first in his class, and it scratches at us, right? Or, my son, he just finished his hifz. It scratches at us. And these things, they're very difficult to avoid sometimes. Sometimes they're very difficult to deal with. But having the feeling is very different than acting on the feeling. So how can I act on my jealousy in a bad way? Words. I can say something, right? I can say, like, oh yeah, he just finished his hifz. Oh yeah, you have a really good relationship with the school. Huh?
When my stomach is full, my mind becomes empty.
Right. When your stomach is full, your mind becomes empty. Is that how it works? But I'm saying, when we eat and we fill our stomachs, why do you think Ghazali mentions this? Why is it a problem?
You become lazy.
You become lazy, right? That's part of the issue and that's part of the problem. And that's why Ghazali actually mentions it. Okay. So that's why he mentions it. He says that an individual become lazy, he won't pray, right? He'll leave off adhkar, he'll leave off doing hasanat. Why? Even when he hears good things, he doesn't feel like listening. He doesn't feel like listening anymore. But is eating to my fill, is that, again, remember, look at all of these things individually. Is eating to my fill a problem in and of itself? No, it's not. When does it become a problem? When does it become an issue?
When it takes you away from you.
When it takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or if you find yourself consistently and constantly doing that, right? If your goal and your drive is to just fill your stomach, then that's not going to bring you too closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, love of adornment. What if I want to look nice? A man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to him, Ya Rasulullah, I love looking nice. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Inna Allah jameel wa yuhib al-jamal. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful and he loves beauty. And he also said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that a slave shows his beauty as a sign of thankfulness to Allah and what he has blessed him. Again, so where does this become a problem? When it consumes you. I mean, you guys are seeing a pattern here, right? Right? When these things consume you, it becomes a problem, but in and of themselves, they can actually be used for good and they can be used for bad. This one might be a problem in and of itself. Striving to gain the favor of others, and it also depends, right? If that's all you do is work to please people, what's going to happen? You're not going to spend time being closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ultimately, somebody who's always pleasing others, what's the main problem, or what's one of the main issues with that? They're usually not being honest with themselves, right? If I'm so busy trying to make other people happy, that means that I'm putting on different fronts and I'm putting on different faces. Because is it possible to make all people happy?
No.
No, it's impossible. Now, why is that? People are different, right? People are different. It's on a very basic level, on a very summary level, people are different, right? And if people are different, it's not possible to please them all. Like, but if I'm working to please my parents, or I'm working to please my wife, or I'm working to please my children, right? Is there a problem in that? No. But even those, do they have limits?
Yes.
Right, to limit. As long as that does not consume. Like haste. He mentions haste. Why is that an issue? Why is that a problem? Right, you can be forgetful, meaning that you can start skipping over things. Right, when you're hasty, that means that you're not giving that worship, that work, that item its due what? Not just due process, you're not giving it its due time, right? You're not giving it its due attention. And when you don't give attention to something, what happens is that you end up skipping over sections, you end up skipping over parts. Assets, money. That's all we do. Again, if it consumes, right? If the consumption of just running after wealth, if all it does is consume you, but at the same time, what is something you can do with dirham and dirham? What's something you can do with money? I'm sorry? You can use it for supply, you can use it for good, you can use it for buildings, right? You can use it for pop, you can use it for endowments. There's so many things that you can do with wealth, and there's so many things you can do with money, and something that shouldn't be looked down on. Like, what about stinginess? And fear of poverty? Huh? Well, I mean, I think attachment to money, what do you guys think about that? If a person loves money.
It's not always bad, but it can get to a point where it consumes you.
Right, again, it has that, if it's consuming you, but I would even argue that love of money is natural. I don't think there's anything unnatural about loving money.
If anything, like the stinginess and fear of poverty, that's attachment to like this world more.
But does anybody want to be poor?
Like stinginess and fear of poverty, not the same thing.
Right, they can be related and they can be different. I agree with you, for sure. So first of all, what is the difference between stinginess and fear of poverty? What is stinginess?
Cheap.
Like, it's being cheap. Very, very basic, in a very basic sense, it's being cheap. Is being cheap a problem? Not always. So when is it okay to be cheap, and when is it a problem to be cheap? Okay. Right, the cause is like what? Like, what does it mean? Like, so where is it okay for me to be stingy, and where is it not okay for me to be stingy?
And be conscious about how much I spend so I can pay for my children's.
Like when it comes to food or something,
Necessity.
you shouldn't be stingy. You should
So
buy
how
the
do
best quality.
how do I determine what is stingy and what is not? What if I'm used to eating chicken, meat, different dishes every day, right? And I think this happens in most of our homes. And then all of a sudden, my dad starts buying lentils and pasta and tomato sauce and vegetables for that whole week. He said, stop being cheap, Dad. And he'd be like, I'm not being cheap. These are organic vegetables. This is organic pasta. It's not as clear sometimes as we think it is.
So it's individual?
It's very individual, and it's very subjective. Because what is stingy to me might not be stingy to you. And even people who have similar salaries, the way they live their lives can be very different, right? And even people who have different salaries, they can live similar lives. How an individual spends his money, how he deals with it, it's an individual experience. Like, so who determines that? Who determines what the line is of spending? Huh? Yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. Nobody can come and tell you, like, no, you can only spend $50,000, or you can only spend $30,000, and you can only spend $20,000. From the outside, you can, because only I know my expenses. I know how much I eat. I know how much my family eat. And in different families, they might not be big people, but some people, they just eat a lot, right? Like naturally, they eat more than other people. And some people, naturally, they eat less than other people. Is it possible that somebody from outside can come and tell you how much to eat or how much not to eat? It's like, no, you already had 3 glasses of water. You can't have a whole glass. It's
Where?
Huh?
Where?
Where what? A personal trainer? Personal trainer? But even a personal trainer is optional, and it's something that you impose on yourself, right?
That benefits you too.
No, I'm saying, but you impose it on yourself.
Yeah.
And even with the personal trainer, when you get tired of them, what can you do? You can be like, man, get out of here. I'm not following these rules anymore.
I mean, where sometimes if there is somebody control means the word.
Oh, I mean, that's different. So if somebody can, and let's think about that. If somebody else is controlling the water, what do we call it? Generally. Oh, Lord. Yeah. Water. How can you tell people how much water they can have and how much water they can't have?
Access we have only limited.
Oh, you're talking about Sudan and Egypt. You had to make it political. Yeah. No, so I mean, the thing is, listen, that's more of a socio-political discussion. And again, How do you determine how much water they need? You can look at past consumption. You can look, right? There are a number of things that you can look at when you're talking about a population. But in general, when we talk about ourselves and individuals, all of these things are very individual. But if we understand on a state level and all these things, the rules are a little bit different, right? When states deal with each other, it's very different because you have fixed populations and you have fixed consumption, usually, right? So, for example, in the United States, if they used 300 billion gallons of water last year, how much do you think we've used this year? Maybe a little bit more, right? Because the population went up, maybe we used a little bit more. But do you think that if someone said, okay, now you guys have to use 200 billion, do you think it's possible, it's reasonable? Or even 295, right? So, but can you look at the past trend to help you determine how much water is needed? Yes, I think that definitely can happen. But for here, we're talking about an individual, right? I'm not talking on the state level. So the next thing, over here at Tamadhub. And what does that mean? When we think like, oh, everybody belongs to the madhab, what is the thing that comes to mind immediately? Ḥanbali, Shafi'i, Hanafi, Maliki, right? This is what comes to mind. But do you, nowadays, forget the past, nowadays, do these different madhahib, do they fight with each other? The people of different madhahib? They do? Where about? No, they don't. Well, you don't find that. Alhamdulillah. Like this, I don't think in general you'll find that. I think you'll find a lot of tolerance. But tamadhub, in actually following a particular school of thought, is there fighting in the Muslims with that? Not in the classical fiqh sense. Is it still fighting? Are people forming groups and fighting each other? Yes, they are. You're Salafi, you're Sufi, you're Ikhwani, you're Tablighi. Is this happening or no? And when was Ghazali complaining about this? Remember, he died 505. We are now in the year 1442. He's complaining about this 900 years ago. Even now, it's like, oh, mashallah, he's good. Oh, but he didn't study at Azhar. And the Azhari, oh, yeah, I graduated from Azhar. And the one who graduated from the Saudi University is like, oh, he's Azhari. The Saudi University, he looks like, oh, you graduated from Qaraween. The Qaraween guy, you graduated from Deoband. You still have this institutional infighting within each other today. But it's just different groups. So yes, we don't have Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, fighting with each other, but we have the Azhari fighting the one from Qaraween fighting the one from Jami'a Islamiyya, Medina, Jami'a Islamiyya, Medina fighting the one from Madrasa Deoband, and the Alawis from Daleen fighting. You have all of these institutions fighting and competing with each other. And how are they competing with each other? No, his salah is batil, this guy is kafir, this guy is fasiq, he's mubtada'. The same exact thing is happening today. Which leads to the next point Ghazali brings. How do they do it? By telling people, oh, you need to study this, and you need to know this. What does a Muslim need to know? He needs to know the 5 pillars. He needs to know that I have to believe in Allah, I believe in the Messenger, I need to pray, I need to fast, I need to give zakat, and I need to make hajj. Do I need to know more than this? Is it good to know more than this? Yeah. Absolutely. But as a Muslim, do I need to know more than this? Like, what else does a Muslim need to know? As well as Iman. Right? To believe in Allah, to believe in His books, to believe in His messengers, to believe in His angels, to believe in the last day, to believe in His qadar. Does Allah tell us how we need to believe in these? He says how we need to. So the angels, how do they look? The books, how are they revealed? Right, but the thing is, like, the details of all these things, did Allah obligate us to know? Or did He just say, no, you just need to believe in these? He said, just believe in these. How tall was Noah? What color's hair was Shu'aib? Are we obligated to know these things? Even about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does Allah specifically tell us you need to believe in Allah's Dhat, Allah's essence like this? No. What does He command us to believe? That Allah is one. This is what He commands us to do. And He commands us that we are not allowed to make shirk. All of these discussions, does Allah have hands? Does Allah have a face? Does Allah have this? Is Allah up? Is Allah down? These discussions, these are not going to benefit anyone. These discussions are not healthy for anyone. And these same discussions are happening today. And who are they happening with? They're happening with the lay Muslim, with the communists. And this is one of the reasons that the Muslims are split. When was Ghazali complaining about this? He was complaining about this 900 years ago. And lastly, do we have this problem? Yes. We do. I agree. But what does it mean to have su'al Muslim, to have bad thoughts about Muslims? And can some of it be justified, or can none of it be justified? Sure, okay. Like what? Give me an example. No, I'm just talking about Muslims in general. So let me give you an example. Man, I never go to Muslim mechanics.
Huh?
I'm just saying.
Mechanics?
I'm giving you an example, yeah.
Always a
I never go to Muslim mechanics. Is that thinking ill of Muslims?
No.
No. Why is that?
Why?
Okay. That's the question to ask. Like, why do you think like that? Well, I went to 5 mechanics and they all messed up.
The experience with them.
Because it's my personal experience. Am I talking about their iman?
No.
No. I'm talking about business practices, right? And I'm talking about my personal dealings. But if I think ill of Muslims, wallahi, most Muslims are committing shirk anyway. Most Muslims are doing haram anyway. Yes or no? What is the problem with this thought, this train of thought?
You think I'm better than you?
This, in all of these things, wallahi, all of these things, you know what the source of most of these problems is? Kibr. Think about it. I'm not going to bring my anger down, and I'm going to let it consume me. Why? Because of who I am and because of my arrogance. I'm going to be, how can a person deserve to have better than me or more than me? Filling my stomach, I deserve that Allah has given me, so I'm going to fill my stomach with it. And I don't need all of these other people. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what they're talking about. They're stupid. Wallahi, all of these pathways are extremely dangerous. Even like these two, this is something we suffer from. Very clear. Now, I was talking to them how people from different institutions, whether you graduate from Kareem, you graduate from like all of these, or like Deoband or at Jamia or Qura, where I graduated from, best out of all of them, by the way. No, but you see how easy it is? You see how easy it is? And the reason, because everybody wants their institution to be the best.
Both is there.
Right? I'm sorry?
Because he is there.
Yeah, because he came from there. But in order for me to have a good judge of all of these institutions, what should I realistically have to do?
Spend time.
I have to spend time in all of them. Is it fair that I speak about other institutions and I've never visited them and I don't know about them? And that's exactly what happens. So in the past, what Ghazali is talking about is like the Shafis used to speak against the Ḥanbalis, and the Ḥanbalis used to speak against the Hanafis used to speak against the man. The problem that he had, he's like, he hasn't even studied these other madhāhib. You haven't even looked at what they said. You're speaking about them, and you're cursing them. So, like many of these, if not most of them, the basis of them is kibr. It really is. It's the thing that يجر واحد إلى هذا. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. So, in Ghazali, he says this very clearly. He said, protecting these doors, he said, fardu ayn. And he doesn't use that a lot. But he says this very specifically. He said, protecting these doors, fardu ayn. That's an individual obligation for an individual to protect these doors. So then he asks us, and he gives us ways. He said, okay, how do we keep these entrances blocked? How do we make sure that the shaitan is not able to enter through these entrances? What do you guys think? I'm sorry? Remembering Allah. So he talks about this and he says no. He says by purifying your heart through tazkīyah. And how is tazkīyah done? He says that the true nature of remembrance, there are two things that are necessary. You build up in wara, in piety and taqwa, and you cleanse yourself of all blameworthy qualities. So if I have a problem with hasad, what do I need to do? I need to focus on removing. If I have an anger issue, I need to focus on removing. If I keep thinking ill of other people, I need to figure out ways to remove. And he mentions what you said. He says, just a suggestion. Dhikr, he says, is just a suggestion to the self, which has no power over the heart and does not ward off the power of shaitan. He said, if an individual doesn't purify his heart, all dhikr is a suggestion. And a suggestion, he mentions like this. He said, if you have a dog and you say something to it, what'll happen? It'll probably run away. But what if you have meat and bread in your hands? It doesn't matter what you say to the dog. What's going to happen? The dog is going to chase you wherever you go. And he says, well, how can that be? If I allow this filth to stay with me, it doesn't matter how much dhikr I do. It will never reach my heart, and it will never purify me. And this is deep, considering this is such like a Sufi book, right? For him to say, right? For him to say this is very deep. That he's saying, no, like your heart has to be pure first. We have to remember he talked about the heart being a vessel and a container. If we don't cleanse that container, there's no way that we'll be able to block those doors and to fill our hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says that the higher the level of worship, what happens to the whisperings of shaitan? They also go up. And he says, and he mentions that the place that you will receive the most whispers are in the prayer. Why? Because the prayer is the highest level of ibadah. It's the highest level of worship. And he said this is it's like a linear relationship. So the more, I should actually have put this on the ground. It would have made more sense. But the higher the worship, the higher the type of worship, the more whispering an individual will have, because he's constantly going to want to distract you away from those things that are more important to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he talks about the roles of the angels and demons, and this is used in a very metaphorical way by Ghazali. When he talks about angels and demons, he's talking about, he can be talking about actual shayateen, and he can be talking about actual angels in some cases, but it's usually the prompts that we have within our hearts. So he talks about the angels being prompts for good, and the demons being prompts for evil. And he talks about how when angels and demons make an appearance, or when they come and they manifest themselves to mankind, they manifest themselves in different ways. So he says demons, they manifest themselves in the ways of dogs, frogs, pigs. Why did he mention these animals specifically? Let's think about it.
Does it have to do with the salah?
It doesn't have to do with the salah. This is more has to do with culturally. These are animals that they're considered dirty. Does that make sense? Religiously, we would share with these two, with the dog and the pig. But the thing, there are two animals that are actually mentioned in the Sunnah that shayateen appear as. You guys know? Cat. No, not cats. Dogs is one, and the second, and snakes. So those are the two animals that are actually mentioned in the Sunnah. These are more it's more culturally how they look at the different animals. So the angels, how do they appear? As birds. I think that's more American culture. And so in the past, they'd always appear in like beautiful human forms. Even Jibreel used to appear in the form of a man, of Iḥyā, right? So Iḥyā was very handsome, right? Extremely handsome man, and he would appear in his form sometimes. And these are the forms that they would show to the people. Ghazali mentions that there's also for the Sufi or for the Sufi master, they would actually show their true form sometimes. So the master sometimes they would actually see the true form of the shaitan or the true form of the angel, just like the prophet, huh? Interesting. And he basically closes with this, but this is the end of the discussion. The most important part of this entire section, honestly, to me, is this. And these two really hit home with me specifically, because I felt like these are major problems in many communities. So if there are any questions, I'll take them now. That was the last of what is discussed in this chapter, inshallah. والله أعلم صلى الله عليه وسلم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Jawad or Rami, if you guys have any questions, inshallah, I can take them now.
I'm good. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh.
Ameen wa iyyak, ya akhi, Allah yafak. Rami?
Sorry, I do have a question.
You do?
Regarding
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
Regarding thinking ill of Muslims, you know how like in our common culture, we always we don't tell anybody anything that's happening good in our lives because of jealousy or hasad.
Yes.
And I read somewhere, like, I think Zerabos were like that this goes against the thing of like thinking good of Muslims.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, like, how do we reconcile those two things? Like, should we not fear and just say, like, if you got a new thing or whatever, or do we keep it secret? Like, how does it? What's the reconciliation there?
So the thing is, I think there's also a difference between putting people in fitna, right? So just because I can't say, oh, well, I don't think bad about Muslims, and then put $100 bill in the middle of the musalla and walk away. Yeah, yes or no?
Yeah.
And the same thing when it comes to, like, purchasing something new or something that is unique or something that other people don't have. Even with that situation, I personally, I'll only tell, close friends or people who I trust. Why? Because I don't want to put other people in fitna. Does that make sense? It's not because I think bad about people. It's because I don't want other people to, to feel ill, or I want other people to feel like they have less, because you really don't want to put people in difficult situations, right?
Right.
So, for example, if Allah blesses me with, like, a Lamborghini or something. Okay, I mean, it's fine. I have that and Allah has given it to me, but does it mean I should take every opportunity I have to go drive it around?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's like, it's not Allah Mustan. But there are certain happinesses that the Prophet ﷺ actually encouraged us to share. What are those happinesses that we're encouraged to share with other people?
Wedding.
I'm sorry?
Wedding.
Oh, a wedding, yes, absolutely. So when we get married, this is something Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to share with other people. What else? When we have a child, like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with a child. Does it mean I have to tell everyone my wife is pregnant? No, it doesn't, right? That's not necessary. But when I have a child, I should, at that point, announce it, because at this point, the chances of a woman being affected by hasad while the child is in the womb are very high, right? And the child can actually be hurt. But when the child is born and healthy, the chances they become less. They become less, and Allah knows best. It would seem like that's why the Prophet, he did this. And not just that, when we're happy as individuals, we want other people to share in our happiness. That's part of community. And I think that's something that's really important. And even in sadness, right? The Prophet, there are certain occasions where he told us to take part in sadness, like what? Like death, right? And that's something that's really important. that a community come together at a person's death, and that we share that sadness with the brother and sister, who passed. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
طيب الله يبارك فيك يا أخي. We'll end here. والله أعلم وصلى الله على خير خلق نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وجزاكم الله خير.
Sure, there was a slide and I had a question.
تفضل يا أخي. Go ahead.
Could you go up front? Yeah, the question is taken on. Yes, not the
This?
When you do tahalli,
Yeah.
so the thing is, on what basis am I doing that? Or sometimes I can lie to myself. I can.
Yes.
Then what is the guide of me doing that person tahalli?
Okay. So basically, if I'm removing myself from someone else, it really depends. Now, what if that person hurt me? Example. When Wahshi came to the Prophet ﷺ and he accepted Islam and he announced his Islam, what did the Prophet ﷺ ask him? He said, how did you kill my uncle? How did you kill Hamza? And Wahshi described it to him. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say to him after that?
Please don't be.
He said, don't be around me. He said, when I look at you, I hurt. And I'm recalled of my uncle. So just because he forgave him, it doesn't mean that he has to forget, right? And he doesn't have to deal with it. And I think this is more a discussion of forgiveness. So forgiveness is not a switch, right? You can't just ask someone, and you say, and done. Your heart switches and you're good. You know what I mean? Like if your iman is like, you're at like this high super level of iman. Some people, mashallah, they can. You say, Wallahi, I'm sorry. You'd be like, yeah, no problem, done. Like Abu Bakr, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him about Misla, to continue his relationship with Misla, what did he do? Not only did he start his stipend again, he gave him more than he would give him before. And this is someone who accused his daughter of zina. Like some people, subhanAllah, they have reached this level, like, there's amazing levels. But for some people, man, they're not there. And some people say, oh, how can you not forgive someone? Hey, what if this person raped my daughter? Right? And I'm talking about serious issues that actually happen. What can you forgive him? Can people forgive him? Yeah, there are some people like that. But does it mean that you have to? No. Right? You are your ownership of, you own the forgiveness. And what does that mean? Because sometimes the al-ma'fu, the one who has the ability to forgive, you see a volume. So what does he do? Is that because he has the ability to forgive, he'll keep throwing it in the other person's face. And this is bull. This is oppression. This is not Allah. My So you make a choice. You say, okay, listen, I don't forgive you, and you don't deal with this person anymore. And that's it, done. The person can come back, then he can come back and again and again and again, and you can keep telling them the same answer. And maybe one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open your heart. But until then, well, you have no obligation for that. Or a person can have stolen money from you or done something to you. Do I need to have the same relationship again? No, absolutely not. I can tell the person, this person who wronged me, they stole my car, for example, and they come back to me and they're like, man, I'm sorry I stole your car. I'm not hospitable. Like, I'm not going to hold you accountable in front of Allah, but I don't want to deal with you over here. Okay. I don't see a problem with that either.
But is it because of the lack of weakness of our iman?
Well, no. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he says about the one who does aql? He said, ahsan wa afdal, right? But is the person who doesn't naqis in any way? Does Allah yulūm alladhī mā ya'qul?
ألا تحبون أن يغفر الله.
Yeah.
So if we remember that and wish that, that's fine.
لكن هذا من باب أحسن وأفضل. No, I'm very honest. Like, it's ideal, but at the end of the day, does it mean if I don't forgive someone, iman naqis?
No. It's not the miqas.
Right? It's not. I can't judge someone on that because, wallahi, there are some small things that sometimes people do that we don't know that really hurt our heart. Right? There are some things that we don't even imagine, like they hurt our heart. You know what I mean? Like, for example, if your wife, she comes to you and you come home one day and she's like, she gives you something to eat And she's like, man, I spent all day on this and I know it's your favorite meal. And you're like, oh yeah, really? Throw it against the wall.
Oh.
No, but I'm saying, what is the, financially, monetarily, what is the value of this meal? Like just a few dollars, right? It's gonna be like $2, $3. But the pain that you put in her heart, how big is it? Well, it's very deep, right? It's a very deep pain. You're like, how are you feeding me this garbage? How can you think this is my favorite? Yeah, you know, sometimes kalam, it's very dangerous. You know, the things that we say. It's extremely dangerous. And you know, sometimes we don't think. So the thing is, like, you know, these are the type of situations, like, you know, like afu is very difficult. It's a very difficult subject, and you know, just kind of learning how to navigate it and deal with it, even on a personal level. And the thing is, even if a person comes to you, sometimes people need time, but we have to be honest the entire forgiveness process. Meaning that if someone asks me for forgiveness and be like, listen, I can't deal with you right now, come back to me in 2 weeks. I need time to process. Well, what shit? But he can't come back in 2 weeks and you say, okay, I need 2 more weeks. And then after 2 weeks, be like, come back in a month, right? You can't, because you say for now. And now you're doing both. Now you're being oppressive. But give it time and serious, honesty. Be honest. Be honest with him, be honest with yourself on what you need and how much time you need. Or just tell him, be like, I'm sorry, no, I can't. Wallahi, I can't. I don't want to see you. Okay. Does this person still have a chance in front of Allah? For sure. Of course. Of course. إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر لمن يشاء. So, you know, I don't have power over Allah in that if I wrong someone or someone wrongs me, that I can't say to Allah, well, I didn't forgive him. Well, it's not like I can't do that. If Allah says, okay, too bad, go to paradise. There's nothing that we can do, realistically. But like I think, you know, forgiveness is something that it's a real issue, and I think we really need a better idea of understanding. Because you know the other thing that we do. Well, in my heart, I don't forgive this person, but I have so many people. You know what I mean? Just be forgive me, Allah. You know what I mean? And we start using this as blackmail. We start using it as blackmail, and we force this person to do it. But in his heart, what happened? He didn't really do it. You know what the problem is by him saying it and not doing it? He'll stand in front of Allah. And Allah will hold him accountable for lying, that, you know, you said you forgive him. But Allah said, well, and he's going to hold the zalim accountable. So both of them now in custody. So
once you forgive that, you have
no, but you have to forgive from where? You have to forgive from yourself. And you have to be honest. Allah is. So I ask Allah to make us honest, and when all of our dealings, and make us, and also make us from those who do accept afu and give afu. Amen.